Welcome to a breaking news interview and reflection on the economic trade war that's been declared on Canada by the Trump administration, and essentially the collapse of trade talks that have been going on now for some time. John Trelevin, good morning. You must be, as a trade professional, an ambassador, and a representative to Canada for likely 50, 60 years overseas. What is your position on this attack on Canada sovereignty?
Well, I don't want to repeat what's in the media today. The negotiations may not have been a negotiation. It may have been a shakedown. It kind of certainly looks like a shakedown. It's more than unfortunate for both countries. You know, a long time ago, when a Canadian Prime Minister was on his way to Washington for a state visit, it was Jean Chrétien, we were asked to determine how many jobs were created or sustained by $1 billion worth of Canadian exports. And we worked with people in the US Department of Commerce, so there would be two numbers that would be used by the president and the prime minister. And a group of Canadian government economists came up with the number, about 11,000 jobs per $1 billion in exports were created or sustained. And if $1 billion order hit the Canadian economy at one moment, you would create 6,332 jobs. Well, when we did the math, both in the United States at that time, about 5 million people were employed producing goods that Canadians bought, goods and services, and about 5 million people in Canada were employed producing goods and services that the United States bought. Of course, far more important to us with a population of only 36 million than to the United States, but the numbers were equal. So let's look at where we are today. Prime Minister Carney has challenged this country to, in response to the current context, to change the way we do things. He's put a number on interprovincial trade barriers that still exist. According to the CFIB, a effective tariff rate between provinces of 31%. About $300 billion a year that is, as he said, is left on the sidewalk. Given the events of Friday night, Saturday morning, and over the weekend, this is the moment for the government of Canada, if necessary, to invoke whatever legal powers it has to eliminate these huge impediments to the success of the Canadian export economy, which clearly now is at greater risk than it has been at any other time, except perhaps during World War II, when people were dying in the trenches in Europe in World War I. So I was absolutely delighted when the Prime Minister, as he assumed office, looked at identified interprovincial barriers as a major constraint to the economic future of the country. The export community, which drives the prosperity of this whole country, can no longer wait. And premiers, who are, of course, rightly upset about the tariff actions from the United States, have to look at themselves in the mirror and ask questions as to why it's harder to sell BC cider in Manitoba than it is to sell BC cider in Minnesota, leaving aside the dynamics of the trade war. So that policy, which he announced from his early days in office, has now got to be put on steroids.
But John, that is certainly part of the reaction to what happened. We are now, because they introduced measures at the last minute that impacted Canada's sovereignty, we have gone to an economic war. which is defined by, which means we have to defend ourselves against incoming weaponry, which in this instance is defined by tariffs and rules minimizing our sovereignty. What is your reaction to that, John?
Well, interprovincial trade barriers, the elimination of them is a very good way to create an additional $300 billion of business opportunities in the country. By the way, the goal that the Prime Minister has enunciated for trade diversification, which you and I have been talking about for some time on this channel, is about $300 billion of trade to be diverted away. Isn't that interesting? So interprovincial trade barriers, the immediate lowering of them, is now a wartime
Necessity.
necessity. It
Yeah.
is no longer an option or a nice thing. Okay. Given the room, reading the room, of course, Canadians want to have an opportunity to hit back. We understand that. And there's discussion, there's almost a pledge that there will be reciprocal tariffs. Well, that's interesting. Now, tariffs are taxes. Taxes that the tariffs that the government of Canada imposes will be paid by Canadians. Yes, some purchasing habits will be diverted, and that's a good thing. But there are some inputs from US businesses that Canadian businesses need to succeed, and you and I know many of them in this region. My concern is that if there's blanket reciprocal tariffs, necessary inputs to guarantee the success or strengthen the success of Canadian exporting companies will become more expensive. I don't really see a reason to do that. Secondly, Canadians are really pissed off. Who can blame us? And we vote with our pocketbooks. We're not traveling to the United States as often as we did. Discretionary travel is way down. But right now, we're conducting a little experiment in this country, and it's one of the benefits of being a federation, around the seemingly contentious issue of American alcohol imports into Canada. Both Saskatchewan and Alberta have not taken those products off the shelves. They're freely available. But what's happened? American beer sales in Alberta are down 96%. American wine sales are down about 40%. Numbers like that, similar numbers like that, are occurring in Saskatchewan. So rather than a reciprocal tariff on liquor products from the United States, in those two provinces, consumers can send the message themselves by simply shopping for other products, and there are lots of them. That's a very strong signal to everybody, including the U.S. authorities. And the industry, the liquor industries in the United States are hurting, because it's not just in Canada that their sales are going down because of this trade war.
Well, without a doubt, Canadians are expressing their anger through purchasing power, and will continue to do so even more. But our Prime Minister, a doctor, Mark Carney, by the way, he's got a doctorate in economics, and an extensive world experience, successful world experience. I am very confident that the retaliatory tariffs that will be implemented on September 8th, which is quite a ways, he's still offering the Americans to claw back here, and that they will be fair and appropriate, and have that will have very focused impacts on the American economy, and will try to minimize at their very best the impact on Canadian economy. I know, and I have full confidence that he will do that, but there is no room here whatsoever to not have some sort of retaliatory effect on what Trump has done to Canada.
Yeah, I'm afraid that you're right. and so be it. And of course, equally important, John, are the mitigation measures for Canadian businesses that will be affected by by the new increase in tariffs. And you know many of those companies as I do around here, and I'm beginning to wonder if any particular organization, say the Sandwich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, will try and aggregate from its membership the impact of U.S. tariffs on their businesses. Just a thought.
That's a great idea. But until that happens, I think that we've had an appropriate response to what happened on Friday. And I suspect we will have many more as this economic war unfolds in front of our faces.
I
Thank you,
agree,
Dr. Lemon.
and no problem.